Hello, and thanks for listening today. I'm Caitlin Wickstrom, the Dairy Marketing Manager for Native Microbials, creators of Galaxis Frontier. Today I have Tony Louters from TNC Louters Dairy here in Merced. And today we are diving into some of the biggest hurdles we see in the industry today, the adoption of new technologies. Let's get started. So Tony, if you want to just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes. Appreciate you coming out here. My name's Tony Louters. I dairy here with my wife, and we have 4 kids, all kind of throughout different parts of the United States, but it's very exciting to be here in Merced. Started out in San Diego originally, down there, and we moved up here in 2005. Actually purchased the facility behind us, and we've been dairying here ever since. And we milk right around 700 Holsteins here on site, and always looking for new ways to kind of get a competitive edge. Actually wasn't in the dairy industry before I married into the family, and decided after a few years of being in the family, I decided that was maybe a route in a business that I was interested in. And so kind of taken an unconventional route of actually getting into the dairy business, but has been a joy and a pleasure to raise a family and meet great people throughout the world and be very involved in the dairy industry. So it's very exciting. I love the industry.
Yeah, that's a very interesting. You don't hear very many people like come into it from like an outside perspective.
So I kind of have a different maybe perspective than most when looking at different things. Like I said, I was a business administration and accounting major, and which obviously serves me well in the dairy industry for sure. But decided to get into the dairy business and just really kind of came in with no preconceived notions, kind of a blank slate, if you will. And I've always kind of tried to keep that mentality alive throughout my career, and I think it served me fairly well throughout. And that's what's exciting about, like I said, looking and peering into new technologies, new things, and not afraid to try new things.
Yeah, for sure. So I do have some questions prepared. We'll kind of just like dive right in. So as I kind of mentioned in the intro, like adoption to new technology in the dairy industry can be slow. Do you think this stems from a lack of meaningful innovation over the years, or are there factors behind this hesitation?
I really think that's probably a couple-fold thing, right? Some of it, if you look at what we had talked about before, I came with a blank slate, right? Really had no preconceived notions. Didn't come from a dairy industry. You got to realize the vast majority of family farms, dairies, right, are generational. Mm-hmm. And so while, yes, they adopt new technologies over the year and try new things to a degree, their dad did, they did, their grandfather did, so on and so forth. So they maybe, I don't want to generalize, but maybe get stuck in routines and ideas and don't necessarily adopt or aren't as quick to adopt new things, because if a previous generation still involved, might not even allow that type of stuff.
Yeah.
Just from what I've experienced in different things. I never really had that.
Yeah.
My father-in-law and my mother-in-law were obviously a help, but I was really kind of on my own as I developed the dairy.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just a couple different things. And so that's one, maybe a generational holdback is potentially one. You also maybe have people speaking into it, whether it be nutritionists, some of the consultants, in where they might feel is better adopted for other things, which is, I've run into that a little bit in my career too. And so you kind of stand firm on what you feel and is the best for your dairy.
Yeah.
And regardless of what other people might say or think, and then you just hope that you prove them wrong.
Yeah, because ultimately as a dairyman, you are the decision maker.
That's right. And that's the way I'm going to take input from you and from other people that might know more than me on certain things, but ultimately it's my dairy and ultimately I do make the decision, right? Not someone else.
Yeah.
And so, and the other thing is, maybe some of these adopting new technologies is a cost factor. And I would say finally the fourth one that I see is so many times people have come to you, say, oh, I can promise you this can happen, this can happen, this can happen. And after a while, we do get a little bit jaded, if you will, a little bit suspect. Oh, they're promising me this. Oh, I've heard that before,
right,
as well. And so I think sometimes you combine all those factors, and that's what really can, hinder or not speed up some technology adoptions.
Yeah. With like maybe some of those like false promises you've seen, is there like trials that you've done with maybe some other products where you've not seen what they have promised you to see? Or is it just like the fact that like you keep hearing the same things over and over again?
Yeah, for me, I have done some trials for sure where, I was excited about the product potential. Luckily, there wasn't a huge outlay of money on my part necessarily, hoping that it was going to work.
Yeah.
I think any trial that you take on, you hope that it works. That is the hope, for me at least.
Right.
Because if it does what it says it's going to do, well, that could be huge, impactful. Because I look at things different. I always want to try to find a product or find things that help my cows become more efficient and me letting the cow be the cow. That is my motto here in my dairy. The less I can interfere, the less I have to give them medicine, the less I have to if I can do preventative maintenance,
right,
her not getting sick, making sure that she has a healthy immune system, the much better off I am, the much better she is, much better my employees are. It goes right on down the list. And so that's what I look for in new products and new technologies. And I'll be honest with you, Caitlin, I'm not afraid to try
new things.
I'm not afraid to try new things, even if it's gonna be see some money out of my pocket, because if it works, I'm excited about that.
Yeah.
And I'm only gonna try things that I think that are gonna be a benefit for me.
Right. So like with that being said, like we are very science-backed, right? We have 9 academic trials that have been peer-reviewed. We have 50 on-farm trials with over 60,000 cows, and we have this massive data set, unlike anything I've ever seen, that proves time and time again that this product works. Why do you think some dairymen are still so hesitant to adopt a product like Galaxis Frontier?
I think with anything, some of that, a lot of if I'm just speaking in generality, probably for the industry, right? Not every dairy farmer, but for sure, a lot of these products, they come to us and they'll say they have so-called scientific data, right? And I always say, it's always been a joke with my vet and some of my cats. There's the science part of it, and then there's what actually happens on my farm, right? Because some of those are completely different worlds and stuff like that to some degree. So what I rely on more and what interests me more than necessarily there is an intricacy of scientific, but that's way above my pay grade. If I'm gonna be, and it's way above most dairymen's pay grade. If there's a few of those, right, that are maybe nutritionists from a background, right? But the vast majority of us are dairy farmers, and we want to take it down to different levels. So the things that are typically more interesting to me are what you were talking about, were the on-farm type of trials. And specifically, even more so, on-farm trials within your geographic area.
Right.
Because the way that we farm here in California is completely different than the Midwest.
Yes.
And our numbers don't compare. They just simply don't.
And your rations are
vastly different.
Right.
They're much more forage-based, much more corn silage-based, because they have a ton of corn silage. So it's just two different animals. It's apples and oranges.
Yeah.
So companies got to realize that when you start comparing those data and doing those things, and people come to us, one of the first questions I always ask, well, where is that? Well, it was back in the Midwest, or it was in Pennsylvania, or it was this or that. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. I'm not saying it might not work.
Yeah.
But understand that that's a completely different animal than something here in California that, and some of those dairies are smaller. Mine's not a big dairy at 700 cows, but those dairies might be 100 cows, right?
Yeah.
200 cows in a tie stall barn. Just a completely different way of dairying.
Right.
And so we have to compare apples and apples. And so for me personally, that's the big thing. And the more that you can have your neighbors around you have those type of testimonials or have that on-farm type of stuff, the much better off it is.
Yeah. And like kind of with that being said, like, we do have trials, both academic and commercial, across the United States. So we do have that data package, but coming from a dairy myself, we've seen time and time again that just because a product works on one dairy, it's not going to work on your neighbor's dairy. Or you could have 2 dairies, and it's still, there's products that wouldn't work on both, but this product is just fundamentally different in that it is going to work on every single dairy. It's just, how do we get that through to both consultants and dairymen? Like where is that breaking point going to be, in your opinion?
In my opinion, it's just going to be time. I mean, at the end of the day, you are talking about overcoming if I've been in dairy business for 20 years, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And that might be a short time compared to other guys, right?
Yeah.
They've been generationally, right? So you have generationally accrued things like those, or promises, right, of certain things, and they just maybe haven't materialized. Maybe materialized in someone else's dairy, but in your eyes, you didn't perceive it, right?
Yeah.
I always tell people perception is reality. Even if it's not reality, but perception is reality.
Yeah.
And so with a lot of these products in the past, I'm not saying Frontier and Native,
Yeah.
right? They've had those experiences time and time again.
Yeah.
So you just don't overcome that overnight.
Yeah.
And it's going to take time, and it's going to take testimonies, and it's going to take those neighbors saying, hey, you know what? At least try this, right? And then you hope that you see the actual impact of what's going to happen. And for everyone, it's a little bit different, right?
Yeah.
What I'm looking for might be completely different than my neighbor down the street, and that might not be a selling point to them.
Yeah.
I don't know. But to your point, I could have two different dairies, manage them exactly the same, and the outcome be completely different. We see that time and time again.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the key in the industry with anyone, that it's just going to take time. You believe in the product, you know that it works, the scientific data, all the other data is there. It just doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
It takes time.
Yeah. For sure.
And that's with the consultants, that's with the dairy farmers, that's with everything. Because you got to realize, they get bombarded every day or every week with multiple different things that's packaged the same way. Whether it's true or not,
Right.
they're packaged all the same.
Yeah.
And everyone has the great sales pitch, if you will.
Yeah.
And they all have some type of scientific data, and they all some type of have peer reviews or stuff on farm. And so that's just the mentality that you overcome.
Yeah.
You have to overcome. And it just takes time. It's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah. So we like to see, kind of switching gears here, but like we like to see ourselves more as like an advanced technology rather
Sure.
than just another feed additive. And you might have a different opinion, but like honestly, like one of the last truly transformative like innovations was BST. Like we haven't really seen anything like that come through. So like, how do we put ourselves into like that category where it's like, this is truly innovative.
Right.
No one else is actually doing what we're doing.
Right.
No one is sequencing rumens and pulling bugs out and replicating them and then isolating them and feeding them back into the cow. Like, we are just fundamentally different. And it's like, how do we position ourselves in that category rather than a feed additive category?
And that's probably the multi-billion-dollar question, right?
We ask ourselves it every day.
Let's be honest with you, right? I mean, that's the multi-billion-dollar question. How do you differentiate yourself from everything else?
Yeah. And using the product, like, what's your opinion of that?
And so for me personally, right, what I've seen, and I told this so my uncle was a salesman that came, and so that obviously helped, right? But, and he made all these type of promises or thoughts and stuff, and I like this type of stuff, right? The more that we can do to benefit the rumen, create rumen health, to create all this type of stuff, it changes the whole cow, right? And benefits the whole cow. And so I think that was one of the big things for me is, okay, what is this going to do and how is this going to impact me? And you guys talk a lot about feed efficiency, and that's good, right? That's important, especially here in California. We want to be feed efficient. And I did increase my feed efficiency, for sure. But those are sometimes so difficult to see with the naked eye and in your pocketbook, right?
Right.
You can see it, but not really, to some degree. When you compare to, but what I did see was a huge over time, right? And it didn't happen right away, like we had talked about. It took with any study that you do, you got to give it 60 days, 60 days to 90 days, because you just don't change the metabolism of a cow overnight. Okay, you just don't. And so what I saw after about 60 days, right? I was kind of like, oh, I don't really know. Okay, we can talk about feed efficiency, Uncle Jake, but at the end of the day, I need to see. All of a sudden, my nutritionist pointed out, because I was kind of like, hey, we need to kind of up things. We kind of need to wrap things up. He's like, Tony, have you taken a look at your butterfat lately? And all of a sudden I looked at my butterfat, and where perennial I was at a 3.8, 3.7 in that range, high production herd. All of a sudden I was at a 4.0, over 4.
Yeah.
between 4.0 and 4.10. And I'm like, holy cows, I've never been there.
Yeah.
Never been there, not even close.
And it's hard to move those points.
I moved them in 1 month after it finally took effect. 1 month. It went from a 3.8 to a 4.0 like right now.
Yeah.
And I've been on ever since, and I've never been below that since.
Yeah.
Okay. So for me, that was it for me, for Tony Louters. That was what I needed to see. And that's because the more, we get paid on fats, right? That's what we get paid on. So the less water that I'm shipping, the better off it is for me. And it's just better off for everyone, and still keeping that same flow as well, right? So energy corrected went up 2 to 3, 4 pounds, right?
Yep.
So, those are the things. But to your point, compared to the BST, right? That was somewhat instantaneously to a degree.
Yeah.
Now, you could agree or disagree on the technology, and we could have an argument even that, a lot of the other scientific stuff that they came along with BST, as far as cow comfort and that's a whole different, maybe help the cow out just as much as actually the BST, right? But it was in a different category. It was at a different level.
Yeah.
And
just because it was instant?
I think so.
You put it in?
You put it in and you see it. You see that result, right? Yeah. You don't have to wait over time. You saw yourself go up 4 to 5 pounds, right?
Yeah.
You saw that. That's the key. For me personally, that's some of the key. And that's some of the difficult things when you're talking about things like this or other things. I personally use stuff because I perceive something and I believe in it, and then it just stays in, right?
Yeah.
I have some other products the same way, but other people might not see that.
Yeah.
So I think that's what it all comes down to. And people just have to give it time, and they have to really look at it from not a jaded perspective.
Yeah.
And so, once again, it's just going to take time. It's going to take people. But the idea of actually comparatively to, if you want to compare two things, BST and something like this is way better because there's an actual benefit to the cow and how she metabolizes and how she does things. She becomes more efficient, right? We're actually eating less feed, producing more.
Yeah.
Where, if you want to comparatively, since you brought it up, compared to BST, right?
Yeah.
They actually ate more, produced more, still probably making them more efficient, but it's a completely different animal.
Yeah.
Here, this thing is actually really benefiting the animal too, right?
Yeah.
And making it a healthier animal.
Right.
And utilizing the feed, utilizing all the nutrients that you have within the products.
Yeah, something like we've been looking at recently is like just the overall livability of the cows that are on Galaxis Frontier. I think we see like somewhere between a 27 or 29% reduction in culls just amongst cows that are on Frontier.
I'll be honest with you, we just kind of did some data, and I don't know the exact, but it was in that range. We just did a review, and it was somewhere in that range for me too. And we're pretty, I want to say, we're fairly dialed in on some things.
Yeah.
And we saw a reduction of 15 to 20% of year over year of pre-Galaxis, and then when we were on Galaxis as well. And so my dairy would have fallen in that category too, and that's a big deal.
Yeah, what kind of like price do you put on?
Well, we can easily talk about that these days. It's like, okay, you're either paying $150 to $200 for a dead cow, if you will, or you're even if she ends up going to beef, but she's not that's $1,500. So it's a $1,700 swing. Yeah. If it ends up being a dead cow, let's say, right, or there's morbidity involved in it, right? But even if it's a cull, but she's even a healthier one than maybe a skinnier one because she transitions better to whatever it might be, that could be $300-400, right?
Yeah.
So that's a big deal.
Yeah.
That's a big deal, especially now. I would say it's probably even higher now, Caitlin, because look at what the prices of animals are. Heifers are. Springers are pushing $4,000, $3,500 to $4,000.
I know.
And regular milk cows are right in that $3,000 range.
Yeah.
So, So I mean, that's a big deal for guys to be able to hold on to cows longer.
Yeah.
For us to be able to, in a market that's not flush with springers.
Yeah.
And a market that's been hit like we have with some of the challenges that we've had with, bird flu and some different things.
Yeah.
So that's a big deal if you're able to hold on to cows.
Yeah.
And they're able to even last even a half a lactation more.
Yeah.
So it's a big deal.
I know we talked to a dairyman yesterday that, he was like, that livability piece, that ROI is even bigger than your milk, it's bigger than your feed efficiency in his eyes. But then again, he was like, but some of those things go hand in hand, right? Your cow's making more milk, you're obviously going to hold on to her.
It's 100% true, and it's not even in his eyes. I personally think it's a fact. Because here's the thing. I personally think he's probably even leaving out one of the most important compartments of that, right? That people don't realize. If you have a livability of, let's say, an extra 6 months, all right? That means that your heifer supply can be less as well.
Yeah.
So now all of a sudden, not only is she probably making you more milk, because that's a fact, right?
Yeah.
They're as they get longer, they pay back better and better, right? Because they've lived in the herd longer.
Yeah.
But now all of a sudden, just imagine if you had to raise 5 less heifers a month. I'm just throwing a number out.
Yeah.
5 less. At $3 a day, over the next 2 years, so that's $2,400.
Right.
So that's 10 grand. So that's a lot of money. So that's because we got to raise that heifer up for 2 years too, right? So that's tying up your capital. So I totally think that's, I look at that in a lot of technologies, right?
Yeah.
The longer that you can have that cow live on be part of your herd, farther that you can push out that lactation curve or those lactation numbers, the way better off you are.
Yeah.
And it's not only on her side, it's
on the back end.
It's on the back end of what you can do to raise less heifers that you have, less capital.
Yeah. We definitely need to figure out how to I think right now when we, present data and try, do that kind of final sales pitch, I think, we build our ROI based off of just the milk flow, the ECN, the feed efficiency, but that's definitely something we're working on building in. And we're getting, every time we do one of these trials, I think we have 12 trials running right now. We're getting more and more of that data.
Well,
so.
And I told you guys from the beginning when you guys first sat down at my place, so you had your CEO here and I think your VP of sales or your head research person. I personally felt that you were, I would not say missing the boat, right? But you have to look at that part. You have to look at the health side. The health side of that animal, in my opinion, because I've seen it, because I have the collars, I adopted that new technology way before anyone else did in California. I was one of the first ones to do it 9 years ago, 10 years ago. And it wasn't for the heat detection, it was for the health side of things.
Yeah.
There's where the true benefit is.
Yeah.
And if you can show that along with everything else, and based on everything, it should be all true because it's helping the rumen, right? The better the rumen can function, the better better off that animal's gonna be. So the health side of things, right? The rumination, so forth and so on, all the technology that we have now to help identify some of the stuff that you're talking about, there I think that's a huge, huge key.
Yeah.
A huge key. It all goes hand in hand.
Yeah.
So I think that will be a huge thing for you guys, and I truly believe that. I think that'd be very important piece that you can share then to dairymen. It's not just this, it's not just A, B, and C. It's also now D and all of the above.
Yeah. I always knew I went to Cal Poly, I was a dairy science major. I always knew the rumen was important, but I just didn't realize how indicative a rumen was of a high performing cow.
Right.
You want to crash a cow, crash a rumen.
Right.
So got to keep her healthy.
Yep, got to keep her healthy.
Yeah. Well, I feel like that was a lot of really good insight. If you don't mind just talking specifically about your experience with Galaxis Frontier, the specific results you've seen, and just you talked a little bit before we started filming about kind of the data we've given you along the way. Just, a quick overview of.
Yeah. So, the results that I've seen from Galaxis and the big driver for me, I'm going to be honest with you, is milk performance or energy corrected milk. I've kind of had to change my mentality thinking a little bit. Mm-hmm. I was always milk driven, right? Pounds of milk.
Yeah.
Now because of Galaxis, I have pounds of milk, but the other thing that came along with it was fat.
Yeah.
something that I wasn't necessarily sorely missing, but I was sitting there bumping around, like I told you, that 92 pounds of milk, right? Let's say with a 3.8, 3.7, depending on the time of year.
Yeah.
And that's what it was. And I'm always looking for something that can give me that edge, right?
Yeah.
That give me this, and this I felt like was it. So I put it in the ration, and sure enough, after about 6 months, I didn't think I saw a lot. And then all of a sudden, one day, I just happened to look at my butterfat, and literally, Kayla, I'm telling you, like at day 60 or something like that,
Yeah.
which was kind of what they said was kind of the ramp up period, if you will.
Yeah.
I believe 45, 60 days, right? Which is typical. Man, I jumped literally overnight from a 3.8 to a 4/4. In between, and I bounced between that 4 and 4.10 for the most part. And a little bit of an increase in protein as well. And so I was tickled pink with that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that was awesome. That was what I was hoping. That was the silver bullet, if you will, for me. Now, based on everything else, based on some of the data that you guys have provided back with everything that's going on top of that, we've also seen an increase in feed efficiency as well by, I think, like 0.06 or something like that, which people, that doesn't seem like a lot, but we kind of did the rest. That's like 3 pounds of dry matter intake, you know, so so we're making more milk with less feed.
Right.
I mean, I think that's kind of the goal, right? I mean, I've always joked, man, wouldn't it be great if we could not feed our cows and they could still produce? I mean, feed your basic expense on a dairy, right?
Yeah.
And so if we can make more milk, energy corrected or otherwise, with less feed,
Yeah.
I pretty much think that's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
So it speaks for itself then at that point in time, and it's not really much. And so, you know, we kind of looked at, you know, breaking down when you include, you know, a little bit less in culls and some other things as well year over year. I mean, I think we're looking at a rate of return, you know, 3x type range. You know, and I think anyone would be pretty happy with a 3x rate of return on any investment that you have, right?
Yep.
So that means you're paying it off 3 times what you put into it. So
Yeah. I think in our current milk market, or at least October's milk market, was like a 4-to-1. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. So, you know, and I think the jury's still out. I mean, as far as for me, I mean, as far as obviously bird flu, you know, that's something that we're dealing with in California. I don't think we'd be remiss not to, you know, at least have that conversation. And, you know, yeah, everyone's getting hit, right, for sure. But one thing about this is, you know, I feel very confident that my cows are as healthy as they can be.
Right.
And have rebounded fairly decent. I mean, just like anyone, we had challenges for sure. But we didn't lose hardly any cows from a death standpoint.
Yep.
So that's a good thing. Now, granted, it was cooler weather, but I attribute it to some of the things that we're doing, right? And Galaxis is definitely one of those
For sure.
products that, you know, I can keep you a healthier rumen, and those cows are going to bounce back, or we're going to be able to send them on their way if that need be, other than having something, you know, where something doesn't make it on a truck or something like that.
Yeah.
We make that decision instead of having that decision made for us
Yeah.
on what we can do with that cow. And so, yeah, that's kind of where we're at now, and we're climbing back up to where we were. We're not terribly far off, but we're getting there.
Yep.
You know, after about 4 weeks, so I feel pretty good about that we're,
Yeah.
and kind of go from there.
Yeah. Awesome. So I usually like to end these with like one very specific question, and that is, what do you have to say to a dairyman that's not using Galaxis Frontier?
There's really no sense of not trying it out, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense not to.
Yeah.
Now, of course, just like anything, is there an investment? I like to say, is there an investment? Absolutely, there's an investment. But just like any investment, right, you're looking for a rate of return.
Right.
And it has the rate of return to come back for it to make sense for you at least to try it out.
Yeah.
And you have to give it time. You can't just give it 60 days.
Yeah.
You have to just like anything, you have to give it a fair shake. And I always say for anything, it's at least 6 months.
Yeah.
And you have to be cognizant aware of the weather as well, right? So there's a lot of different factors that go along in that, but it makes sense not to try it.
With that,
Why would you not want to try something that's going to decrease the amount of feed that a cow will eat while increasing your energy corrected milk?
Yeah, for sure.
That's what I'd have to say.
And like just to that point of like giving it a fair shake, we actually, for customers that stay on for a full lactation, our retention rate is 90%. And that 10%, you know, there's like a few people that pulled it out. We don't really understand why. And then the other few have just gone out of business. So like, I think that truly speaks to the longevity of the product.
Well, and I think that, and I don't know what the industry standard is, Caitlin, on something like that, on products like that, but I do feel that's very interesting, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that does say something about the product for sure, right?
Yeah.
That if you have customers that are on it and 90% stay on it, I go, that's a big deal. They must see something. Otherwise, you're not going to continue to put that investment in if you feel that there's no rate of return.
Exactly.
So
yeah.
That's what I would say.
Well, thank you, Tony,
you're
and
welcome.
thanks for sharing your expertise and experiences with us today. So let's keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible in our industry.
Yep, absolutely. I love it.
All right, thanks.